This episode of the Education Matters podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Mental Health Summit, taking place April 17th to the 18th, 2026 at the Banff Center in Banff, Alberta. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri, and for this special episode, I'm joined once again by the Summit's founder, Dr. Gina Cherkowski. Together, we reflect on last year's gathering and hear directly from attendees who offer a window into how education can meaningfully support mental health and empower learners. So let's get started.
Well, the core idea really is that relationships and connection are absolutely essential nutrients for brain growth and development. Now, that's a pretty weird concept for when I first heard it. We thought of the brain as not relationships, didn't have anything to do with the brain. You know, that old battle about nurture or nature was still being raged and waged. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it genes? Or is it the environment? Well, what we now have learned is that it's both.
This episode of Education Matters is part of our ongoing series in partnership with the Mental Health and Schools Summit. And I'm joined once again by my brilliant co-host for this series, Dr. Gina Cherkowski. And in this conversation, we sit down with Dr. Jean Clinton, a child psychiatrist, educator, and one of the OG voices in Canada on child development and well-being. Jean has spent the better part of 3 decades working with children and families, and what comes through immediately is not only her expertise, but her energy and really her whole vibe. She's thoughtful, direct, and disarmingly funny. And what you'll notice right away is how she moves between the research and real life. She can speak to the science of behavior, but she's always bringing it back to what's actually happening with kids in homes, in classrooms, and in communities. There's a moment in our conversation where she describes what it feels like to be at the bottom of a cliff, supporting children once they've already been struggling. But then she shifts that frame, and we discuss what it would look like to spend more of our time earlier, creating the conditions that make those struggles less likely in the first place. We talk about the role of relationships in shaping brain development, the interplay between genetics and environment, and the real, often underestimated capacity we have to influence outcomes through connection and care. We also spend a lot of time discussing schools, what's realistic, what's possible, and what it looks like to build environments where students feel safe, connected, and are ready to learn, with even things as simple as Fun Fridays. One other thing that I hope you notice is that throughout the podcast, Jean keeps coming back to something really, really important. And that's that this work does not belong to any one role, not to teachers alone, nor principals, nor clinicians. It's shared work across the school community. It was a real pleasure to have this conversation, and I'm looking forward to continuing it with Jean and Gina in Banff with everyone else at this year's Mental Health and Schools Summit. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Dr. Jean Clinton. Gina, welcome back to another Mental Health and Education Matters podcast as my ongoing co-host for this series. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you, Jason. It is a delight to be here. I'm really excited about this year's summit and looking so forward to talking to Dr. Jean, who we got to see at the very first ever Mental Health Summit.
Yes, for sure. And Dr. Jean Clinton, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm very pleased to be here with you.
Excellent. So, Jean, we would have had a proper introduction at this point, but can you maybe let folks know what keeps you busy these days?
What keeps me busy? Well, I'm an infant, child, and adolescent psychiatrist. So not only am I very interested in the mental health of very little children, but I spend a lot of my time understanding and researching how the brain of young people all the way up to age 25 develops. And then I'm a knowledge translator and take what I've learned and make it accessible for as many audiences as will listen to me, Jason. So that's all the way from, I guess, early childhood educators working on the floor, literally with little children, to I've just written a paper with a judge here in Ontario about the importance of child development being thought of and how the brain develops being thought of as decisions are being made about children. So wherever I can go, I'm taking the message that love builds brains.
Well, that's wonderful, and we look forward to sharing that with a audience of leaders across Canada and beyond. So maybe we start with Love Builds Brains, Jean. For folks that aren't familiar with your work, can you kind of describe what the core idea is behind it and really why it's so important right now?
Well, the core idea really is that relationships and connection are absolutely essential nutrients for brain growth and development. Now that's a pretty weird concept
Nice.
for when I first heard it, coming from a medical degree. And when I was in medical school, we thought of the brain as not relationships, didn't have anything to do with the brain. That old battle about nurture or nature was still being raged. And raged, I say, because we used to go out drinking and argue about what was more important. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it genes? Or is it the environment? Well, what we now have learned is that it's both. The genes, our genes, are literally listening to the environment and being activated or silenced in a huge way by the genetic code, for sure. But the new knowledge is that the environment of relationship, connection, emotional atmosphere, for example, in a classroom, builds connection between the different parts of the brain. The big cell is the neuron that there are billions and trillions of. It creates actual connections between the neurons and creates networks and pathways that when a signal comes in, zoom, down it goes, that pathway. So relationships are nutrients, which is a essential concept, but kind of a weird one for many. Not the people who are coming to this conference, because they all know about it through Gina and her work.
For sure. So, when you're looking at when a child feels safe, loved, connected, and you mentioned some of the neural pathways being created when a child feels that way, but can you kind of describe what's maybe more detail, what's happening in the brain, and then really how that shapes their ability to learn?
Yeah, it's a crucial concept, and I'm so glad, Jason, that that we're linking learning and brain development so early in our conversation, because there's so much to think about. So when we are in a safe, nurturing relationship in the early years, it allows parts of the brain to make connections and develop with safety as a predominant feature. Those safe, nurturing relationships translate into classrooms and education, parenting, coaching, all of those things. When you feel safe and you know that you're loved and valuable, areas of the brain for new learning are ripe for the activation. Areas that get in the way of learning, like hot, scary, frightening emotion, that inhibits, it prevents the learning from happening, because when that more primitive limbic system is in charge, the pathways to the learning brain, what's the prefrontal cortex, those pathways are not the same as when the child is feeling safe, valued, and know what they're about. Safe, significant, and situated, as my friend Stephen de Groot describes it. So when you feel safe, you can learn. We used to think that old Descartes said, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Now the great new learning from neuroscience is, I feel, therefore I learn. So important that educators think about the emotional climate in their classroom, not just the curriculum, but the emotional relational curriculum is so important in education.
Well, I always had a lot of problems with Descartes, as brilliant as he was.
Yeah.
I like that version a lot more than the Cogito. Gina.
Gina, I love it. Thank you for saying that. You've actually been saying for many years that what happens in early years is so important over the course of our lifetime. We are seeing increasing levels of stress and anxiety inside our schools. We know disconnection is increasing among young people and sometimes in families. We just saw the recent happiness report with Canada's declining state of happiness, and in particular, our youth. So I'm just wondering if you want to talk about what are some things driving this shift and what are some things that we can do?
Yeah, a great thing for us to focus on here. You know, I wish there was a simple, this is what the problem is, and so therefore, let's just pour all of our money into that. As with many complex things, there are complex reasons. So as I think about my driving force, which is relationships, I think if we look at that, we can see if you have healthy relationships, you are more likely to have a healthy, flourishing opportunity to move forward. If we examine what are relationships like for our young people now, what we see is that they're fractured. They have, as we hear so many times, John Haidt in his Anxious Generation books describes that there are multiple connections, but very little true connection. There's connectivity, but not much true connection. If you back that up a bit, and we ask parents, well, how are you feeling? We find out that there is a huge increase in adult mental non-well-being, that the anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, all of that is increased in adults as well. And we know that when you are preoccupied with your mental health, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to have your ability to focus and be there for your children's needs. Very, very difficult. Not only that, but the supports that you might have had in a previous generation or country. Jason, we were talking about Italy as a country of origin. The idea of having the village, the piazza where everyone gathers and you share the responsibility of everything from taxes to raising kids, that reality is far in the distance, past. But we're hunter-gatherers. We actually need that connection as adults as well as we do with children. And so the big Harvard study looked at following people for many, many years, looking at medical illnesses and what leads to people living longer lives. What's it all about? They were so surprised that one of the major factors in longevity and quality of life wasn't whether you ran a kilometer an hour. No, I don't know how far. You know what I mean. Whether you ran a lot, it was about relationship, and they actually said loneliness kills. So we have adults feeling alienated, stressed, having difficulty knowing how do I support my children, because love is still there, but how do I support my children? Then we've got social media, bang, bang, bang. We all know about that. But one of the other big things is we have educational systems that are focusing on control and sorting and all of those kinds of things, and a lack of awareness about how I feel, therefore I learn. We've got high stakes testing. You know, you might say that's a thing of the US. Well, it's not. It's here alive and well in Canada. And when you're focusing on what I call stuffing the duck, that is force feeding kids a curriculum without looking at, well, what does a young person have to offer themselves? So you get the picture here. There is a constellation of factors. And then you've got the big issues of what the heck is happening in the world, and kids feeling helpless to do anything. And, some young people even deciding they're not going to have children. Why bring them into this world? So all in all, we have a petri dish with all of the components poured into it that says, well, let's see how we can muck up our kids. What are the factors that we need to do to put that in? But there's good news, of course. There's good news, of course, that is that the quality of connection, sense of belonging, and relationships, even for those who had lousy early childhoods, that can change the brain because of neuroplasticity. So it's not all gloom and doom, but there is one heck of a lot of gloom and doom.
So, Jean, you started hinting at the answer to this next question a bit, but maybe I can ask you to put a finer point on it. So since relationships are really the primary driver of healthy development, and of course, these relationships have to take place at home from birth on to school-age children. But what in the education system or in education in general are we kind of undervaluing and overvaluing? I think you got to a bit of the overvaluing piece, but what are the pieces we undervalue that are part of the education system, and maybe where can we enhance those pieces?
Yeah, well, I think very clearly we are undervaluing the knowledge. Two things. One, the knowledge that engagement, which is a big issue in education, engagement requires connection. And it's not just connection to the subject, but as an educator, who you are is just as important as what you do. So I think we're missing that. Well, not great teachers. Ask your kids about great teachers that they've had. And, if you look through this lens, you always see that they are the ones who have made you feel safe to make mistakes. They're the ones that feel that you're valued, that what you have to say is valuable and you're valued, and that you've got an idea of what the purpose of what you're doing is. So that's being missed, except by great teachers. And the other thing that's being missed is that what our kids need to be flourishing is not stuff. It is an idea of how do I create the future and have hope for a future that I want to see. Instead, it is focused on this is what you have to learn at this part in time. But in fact, what we're missing is that when we help kids to develop what Mary Helen Immordino Yang, a neuroscientist in California, talks about, is when we help them or see that they develop what's called transcendent thinking, thinking beyond just the immediate, but, maybe people are feeling this way because their situation has been locked in for a long time, but I dream of changing it, that kind of thing. If we recognize that that's how the brain learns, that's how when kids are followed over time, when you've got that kind of deep thinking, deep learning, you thrive. It requires knowing how the brain learns, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, do we need to have much more of that going on, an understanding of how the brain learns, not to stuff the duck, but to recognize active, playful learning at any time of life is how the brain learns best.
That's awesome, Gene. I'm going to use stuff the duck all the time from now on to refer to that bad practice.
Gene, in your book, you often are talking a lot, like you mentioned belonging. You talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do, and you've mentioned some of them in this podcast. But as we tilt a little bit of a lens more specifically towards mental well-being inside the classroom, I'm wondering if you could talk about, at a systems level, what could we change? And then more at a classroom level, more specifically to help kids feel felt. That's one of the things you do talk about in your book, and create that authentic sense of belonging. What do you think we can do systems level and just the classroom teacher level?
Right. Well, again, it's so important to think about the system. So leadership is absolutely crucial. It's essential for an educational system that is going to be thinking about flourishing of kids. What does that mean? It means at the system level, so thinking at the principal level, thinking at the superintendent, thinking at the director, thinking about at the board of directors, the trustees as it is in Ontario. Everyone needs to be singing from the same song sheet. That the values, it has to start with values, that the values at the board level, the trustees level, the kid in grade 10 can tell you, this is what my board stands for. We value curiosity. We value compassion. We value competencies. I won't go into deep learning. So at the system level, that is required so that at the leadership level, at all of those different levels, there is a focus on, is this learning that we are focusing on? Is it respectful of our values, which is relationship-based? Are we thinking about this learning through an equity lens? And then at the more intimate level there of the principal, does the principal have support in saying the well-being of our educators and our staff is crucially important? Does he or she or they have the support above them to say, okay, guys, Friday is going to be a day of party. Why? Because when we party together, and whatever party looks like, without the alcohol or other stuff, man, but Friday is going to be a day where we connect, all of us. I remember talking to a principal in Ottawa, who was showing me all of these affirmations that were in the toilet in the staff room. And I said, so you've got all these affirmations. What do you do to make things very special? And she says, well, we have 2-ply toilet paper on special occasions. So that's funny, but it was in the top of mind.
Yeah.
It was top of mind. So when you have a staff that feels a sense of belonging, who aren't avoiding the staff room because there are people in there who are always bad-mouthing the principal, the system, the kids, that translates to, in the classroom, in the interaction between the teacher and the young person, there is a sense that I am safe here, the educator. I am valued here, the educator, and I know what my purpose is. So that means I can help kids have that sense of belonging. But first, I need to be able to feel it myself and then see it. So if I felt, then I'm much more open and able to be able to have kids in my presence feel felt. It means that you think of kids as competent and capable, not as that empty vessel that you want to stuff.
In speaking of kids and schools, when you describe adolescence as the brain under construction, what do educators need to understand about that phase in development?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I think of is the phrase, they're not doing it on purpose, right? So many times as parents, we wonder, are they just doing that to drive me crazy? And educators think they know what they're supposed to do. They're just doing this on purpose. Well, they are not necessarily doing it on purpose to get you riled up. But they may well be doing it on purpose because what they see as their purpose is connecting to their peers, is looking for novelty, is looking for thrills. Their biology is saying, look for that kind of stuff. And they are less likely to think of, well, what does mom and dad say? What does a teacher say? The peers come in big time. So they may know of risk. They make decisions, not because they weren't thinking, but that they were thinking something different than we as adults might be thinking. And that the risk of being pushed out of the group, not feeling that sense of belonging, is a higher negative than the consequence of that action. So you see great kids doing dumb things like smoking. What are they doing smoking? I recall this conversation in my own home with one of my 5 children. What is he doing smoking? Well, he knows, family doctors, he wants to be a doctor, but the pressure of the peer, the risk of being outside that, that had more guts to him than the other. So risk-taking, novelty-seeking, thrill-seeking, emotional buzz is so important. One of the big things is that our thrill hormone, our reward neurotransmitter, dopamine, is under construction. All those pathways and connections are under construction. And so in adolescence, it's as if the baseline is low. It's just coming to be. But the buzz you get when you do something exciting, it's pretty reinforcing. You love it. You love it. You want more of it. Yeah. So that's what I think. They're not doing it on purpose. They're under construction.
Now, I appreciate that term, under construction. That's another one I'm going to use. Now, Gene, I have a daughter who just turned 14, and my son turns 13 in a couple of weeks. And I even have a background in this area, this deep interest in the area of philosophy of mind, evolutionary psychology. And I remember reading something interesting once as to, why teenagers rebel so much. And they connected it to the need for genetic variation. So their brains would literally force them to get into arguments with their parents. So they would leave the village, leave the town, and go find a mate 100 kilometers downstream, and then eventually come back to the village and reintegrate with the family. Even knowing all that, I struggle with my teenagers, and I'm just getting started. So not only as a psychologist, but as a mom of 5, can you give me some guidance as to maybe how to catch myself, how to remember these things that I know, or just some tactics you might have in kind of penetrating that adolescent disposition?
Yeah. Well, I would love to say, oh, of course, I'm an expert because I did it perfectly. Not at all. Oh, my goodness. So my mantra has always been, Jason, progress, not perfection. And, I remember one of my dear friends and mentors, the late Dr. Clyde Hertzman, saying, I don't know who it was, Carrie or somebody, anyway, said, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So first of all, you're going to make errors and limit the amount of time that you spend thinking about your errors and more time thinking about how my relationship survives this period of time is way, way more important than thinking about what's the right consequence or, what are they doing, dyeing their hair purple and shaving the sides. Say, thank goodness the thing we have to argue about is the hair and this baldness rather than the sex and the drugs and the rock and roll, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So it really, as I look back, it really is being able to say how we connect at the end of the day is so important. I can tell you that I've had experience with different flares in adolescence, shall we say, with 5 kids who are all different. I won't name any of my children, but they have been known to be in the back of a police cruiser, handcuffed and very inebriated. Now, you might say, well, who is going to listen to you if that's how you parent it? Well, because you know what? It ain't all about what we have done. There may be some biology like extroversion and relationship counts. Walking in the door, don't beak off at them. They've had enough. Let them go and sleep it off and then say, tell me. What we want to do is rip them to shreds and say, oh, blah, blah, blah. Tell me. Because every behavior has a reason. Now, that reason may be, what? We may think, but it's important to them. So we need to always think, how do I understand this behavior from their point of view? So you connect before you correct, Jason. You do it in the little ones, but you connect before you correct as well in the adolescent years.
Yeah, Gene, I think that's sound advice. I mean, my father's a professor of literature and philosophy as well. I think kind of had this kind of innate ability with us growing up to never let something go unsaid. It was almost like, you want to talk again, you want to talk, okay. But so it was always something in our house where the conversation was coming and then things were repaired and you felt heard in the very least.
Oh, Jason, you just made a point that's so important. Repair. You're going to screw up. There's no question about that. Even in infancy, some of the research looks at how much time is the average parent in perfect synchronicity with their little infant. Turns out it's about 30% of the time. So, of course, you're going to feel guilty and examine what you did. At least I hope there's some of that. But recognize that when there are ruptures, repair is hugely healing and creates new connections in the brain that are essential. You know, there's a beautiful Japanese art of using gold to fix the cracks in objects. I can never remember the name of it. Somebody can maybe look it up. But that concept of making something even more beautiful out of a disruption is a really important rupture and repair. So important. Go back, say, you know, I screwed up. I shouldn't have reacted like that. I wish I hadn't reacted like that. Let's talk it over again. Be human.
I think that's wonderful. It reminds me, and actually, this is the second time in a week that I'm quoting this publicly. It reminds me of a Leonard Cohen quote. I think one of the most beautiful quotes anywhere ever. And it's from one of his songs, and it says, "There's a crack in everything, but that's how the light gets in."
Yeah. Beautiful.
And, right, and the idea is nothing's perfect. Everyone's imperfect, but you know that's life. That's part of the process. So. Thank you for that. If we move, Jean, from the family to the community, what does it actually take to better support the well-being of young people?
The village was the original hunter-gatherer scenario or setup. We don't live in villages anymore. You know, we've got these big box stores. You hardly even see your neighbor. We still need it. We still absolutely need it. What does it mean? It means when you're signing your kid up for soccer or gymnastics, if you have the money to do that, the coach matters. The coach matters. Having other adults outside of the family who are crazy about your kid or care about your kid is really important. So we don't have the village, but let's make sure that we are connecting as much as we can with aunts and uncles and coaches and priests and rabbis and ministers. When you look at the kids who do well, who have lots of what we call developmental assets, they're kids who have got people in their lives. Even when you think about resilience, you know, some people have talked about resilience, well, back in the day, as a genetic thing. You know, you're either resilient or not. You got the resilience gene. In fact, there may be some genes that are relevant to resilience, but that's not the end or even the beginning of the story. It's all about not just your relationships, as Michael Unger says, Jean, it's not all about relationships. It is about the connections and the competence that you feel in multiple settings. And, you know, Michael Unger is a fabulous researcher. It is the conditions that the community create to say kids matter. So if I'm trying to decide, am I going to go to a community that is banning skateboarding? Or am I going to go to a community that says our kids need somewhere to go? Let's build a skateboarding park. But let's build it beside the police station, okay? So What is the mentality? You know, in where I live in Hamilton, one of the things that many groups got together and said they wanted to make Hamilton the best place to raise a child. Well, that talks about a municipal strategy. That talks about an educate, it permeates through. So having kids as a priority is so important. There's a wonderful educational philosophy framework called Reggio that comes from Reggio Emilia in Italy. And when you visit Reggio Emilia, the city itself, you see celebrations of children all over the place. The family is honored in a way that I'm not sure that we honor families here. So the invitation needs to be there to be part of this flourishing kids.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the municipal piece too, because I think just physically we are so disconnected, even in, with their neighbors now, as opposed to even 20, 25 years ago, how separate and distinct everybody is. So I think that's a great point. And Gina, I know we are short for time because you are extraordinarily busy, and I want to be respectful of that. So I want to turn it over to Gina for our final question.
I just want to say I love the multiple connections. This creating relationships is a multi-stakeholder solution at all levels: community, schools, individual families. This is all hands on deck. And that's really evident in a lot of the work you do, and I'm really appreciative of that, Jean. Last question would be, as you are a keynote again at the Mental Health Summit this year, and we're so grateful to have you, what would be some of your key messages for the education leaders, the folks that are K-12 mental health stakeholders, and the educators that are there, just to give them a sneak peek of what is one key takeaway you would love them to have?
Well, one key takeaway is listen to Education Matters podcast, because Jason and Gina do an outstanding job. I love these questions, and they shouldn't be over. Well, it is what we've already talked about, really. And that is that who you are is as important as what you do. So how you turn up matters a lot. It matters enough of a lot. I don't know if that's proper English, but we now know that when you have these safe relationships with kids, they do better academically.
Yeah.
So even if you've got the piper who says, well, we have to look at these scores, you can say, not only have we done the score stuff, but our kids are actually thriving and flourishing. Let's not forget learning. It's hugely important for the developing brain that they are learning as well. But keep in mind that who you are and how you are is more important than what you do. So we really need the freedom for educators to be able to take risks and take chances, just like we want the kids to do, to take risks and chances in their learning. Mm-hmm. So they need to be free to do that. They need to be able to, just like we talked about, Jason, that the light that comes through. We know from psychotherapy that it's in times of deep conflict and challenge that the greatest growth happens. In order to be able to do that, you have to feel free to have a Friday where it's party day, where it is relationship and belonging, connection. And you want to be able to walk around the school as a principal, for example, or as a leader, and have the kids say, hi, I know you, I'm glad to see you, rather than, here comes the doo-doo, here comes the principal.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship, connection. You still have to be having the expectations and clear guidelines. But how about rather than having a set of class rules that the kid walks into, rather have a community meeting, a check-in at the beginning of the year, which you do every day. And you say, what do we need to do to make it safe for all of us to learn here? That co-creation is so important to kids feeling that they count, that they matter, that they feel felt. As Mark Brackett, I'm sure, talked to you about, having them know their emotions and know where they are on the emotion wheel requires an educator who knows where they are on that emotion wheel, who needs to have a principal and superintendent. You know, you're getting the picture. It takes the whole community, the whole system to raise that child. But there needs to be systemness.
Right.
Where the top and the kids can tell you why they are in the business they're in. We love learning in our school. We feel safe and we make everybody welcome. How about that as a key message?
Amazing.
I think that's, absolutely wonderful. And your check is in the mail, Gene, for the Education Matters promotion.
Oh, good.
But I look forward to seeing you both again not too long now in Banff. And I will surely make sure we continue this conversation when we're there and connect with our peers there as well. So thank you both very much. And Gina, for being my favorite co-host, thank you very much for another great podcast.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much. And thank you, Jean. Love this.
My pleasure. Thank you to both of you for doing this. It's so important.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Until next time.